You're listening to the Tenets on the Kyle Dempster Studios network. For more information on the show, visit KyleDempsterStudios.com. Hello everybody, my name is Kyle and you are listening to the Tenets, an Elder Scrolls Online podcast. Before we get into introducing my amazing co-host, let's give a brief overview about what this show is going to entail. If you're familiar with Elder Scrolls and you have done the Dark Brotherhood quests in the past, you may know that the 5 tenets are the code that dictate the Dark Brotherhood and their beliefs. Well, taking that and the word and the definition for the word tenets, we are saying that this show is going to give you some help in guiding principles. So when you're on your way through the world of Tamriel, we hope that this is going to be helpful to you. On today's episode, we are going to talk about races, classes, and get into a little bit of weapons. Also, talk a little bit about Bethesda Game Days, since that just wrapped up. My co-host here, Stark, how are you?
Pretty good.
Welcome to the stream here. Well, I guess it's not a stream. We're doing a podcast this time, which is different.
A podcast, a little different.
A little recorded. So you, what's your experience with Elder Scrolls, Stark?
I got into some of the late stress test betas back in 2014, right before the game launched, and was in at early access, and have been off and on here ever since.
Very cool.
About 4 years with the game at this point.
Wow. And you know a ton. You're very active on the forums, and you keep up on a lot of the information for the game.
Yep.
Well, I am quite the opposite. I've been playing Elder Scrolls Online for almost 3 months now. I think that gives us a pretty unique perspective when it comes to recording a show about it. I'm the total noob sauce version of it, and you know quite a bit of information have guided me almost since day one of when I started playing. Very short into it. So what we're aiming to do here, like I said, we're going to try and give people guiding principles of how to get into the game. Many MMOs change as development cycles increase. What was useful information on day one in the past is not necessarily even relevant in the game now, and things get added. So we're going to try and cut through the muck. We're going to give you the best of our knowledge for September 2018. If you're listening to this show in the far-flung future, and not all these concepts may apply in the exact same ways, but what we're giving you now should be a good start if you're looking to roll a new class, learn some basics. If you're just getting into the game, this is the information that'll kind of help you set up a character to do well in the long run. So, Stark, where should we get into this craziness? What class is probably a good spot, huh?
Yeah. Okay, so right now there's 5 classes. One of those was added about there's the Dragon Knight, the Templar, the Sorcerer, the Nightblade, and the Warden. Each of those can perform any of the classic roles in an MMO trinity. They can all function as healers, as tanks, or as DPS, but how they do it is going to be slightly different. And when you're just starting out, some of them do feed into specific roles much better than others. So we've got the Dragon Knight. That's primarily the tank, and a lot of the basic things you'll need to tank in Elder Scrolls Online you can find there. You can run it as DPS, and you can absolutely run a DK healer, but these are a little bit trickier to manage. The Templar is primarily your healer. If you're looking for a sort of priest or crusading warrior, that's a good place to start. Again, they can tank and they can do DPS, but they excel as healers. The Sorcerer excels at DPS. It's primarily AoE nuking. Personally, I run a Sorc tank and have for years, so obviously that's open. And Sorc healing is a major thing that you can't do. It just tends to be regarded a little bit strangely, but they absolutely have the capacity to do so. Nightblades are your sneaky assassin types. They're absolutely fantastic for single target DPS, but they're useful in a wide range of things and can make for some very scary tanks. Not that I've ever managed to figure out how to make a tank work on a Nightblade. Finally, Morrowind added the Warden class. Now, these were originally in development when the game was in beta, but weren't actually there at launch because class wasn't ready for prime time. They're a little unusual in that they can perform any of the 3 roles pretty much equally. On paper, they look primarily like a healer class, and they do that very well. They also have the tools for tanking that the Templar, Sorc, and Nightblade need to go elsewhere for. and they also do pretty good DPS. And it's different from the other classes, so there is that. The key difference between these tends to be flavor, but if you're just starting out, you might want to look at what your class is expected to do rather than immediately go off spec.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm a guy that kind of immediately went off spec, and it did not backfire in my face for what it's worth. For everyone out there wondering if you could do a Nightblade healer, the answer is yes. That's what I decided to do first. So not only I kind of took what I would argue to be some of the worst. It's a recommendation I would not give. Is don't roll a healer first. And if you're going to roll a healer first, maybe stick with a Templar or someone very on spec. It's probably good to start out with a DPS class so that you can actually effectively kill targets that you're going up against in quests. If you're doing a healer first, you're probably going to be a little reliant on someone else to do some of the damage for you. Not that a healer cannot kill, but it is a much slower approach than someone that is pure nuking DPS. That being said,
this is actually
go ahead.
This is actually one of the things about the Templar that makes it ideal for learning to heal, because it can actually transition over to DPS pretty painlessly. You can have one spec set up and just swap some skills around and be ready to do DPS fairly quickly. And that's not quite as true with Nightblades because of how the morphing system works.
Right. When you're we got to get into some morphing here too. There's so much to give you guys, and that's the goal of this podcast, is that there's so much to do when you get into an MMO for the first time that it can be thoroughly overwhelming. But we're going to aim to boil a lot of that down so that you guys can more easily decide what all you want to do, what direction you want to go. So we named the classes. You got a Dragon Knight, Templar, Sorcerer, Nightblade, and Warden. Stark did a great job going over what those do. Now we kind of look at what race do you play, because that's going to be the next question. First of all, you can kind of go with some looks, for sure. And you can't, what information we're going to give you next, you can take it with a grain of salt. We're going to give you what these races excel at, but it's not to say that you cannot roll a certain character of any race class combo. Those do exist out in the world, and if you're someone that's not a huge min-maxer, you're more than welcome to do so. Stark, do you want to run through these, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I can run through them. One of the things actually about this that's worth pointing out ahead of time, some of it is cosmetic, but even when you're going off spec with a race, you're going to get some serious utility value from your choice. So I've been running a Breton Stamblade since launch, and I've never really regretted that decision, but it's not going to be the same thing as if you're running a race that's designed to do this. So there are 10 races in ESO. 9 of them are available by default. The Imperial, so the ones that belong in the province of Cyrodiil, are actually sectioned off, and they're apart. But if you want them, you have to get them through microtransactions. Originally, that was part of the Collector's Edition, but now you can just buy the Collector's Edition upgrade. So each of them can work in a specific role, and each one of them will start into a role faster, though the preference for where you put them is sometimes very different in the meta. The very important thing, though, to understand is when we're talking about the meta, this is something that does not affect most players. It only affects when you're dealing with trying to get the best score on some very specific endgame content. So if somebody's telling you, well, you've got this race, you can't do X or Y, but they're wrong. So we have the Argonians. These are the lizard people of Black Marsh. They are primarily designed to function around healing. They have a resto staff as their accelerated skill line. So each of the races has a skill line that advances faster than the others. This is somewhat similar to how skills worked in the single-player games, but this is the only element of that came over. So they'll actually learn to heal faster than other classes on their weapon. They also have increased swim speed. This makes them very useful if you want to have a character to run around and collect stuff. Just collect crafting materials for yourself, or find treasure chests or other things, because anytime you're dealing with a zone that has a lot of water, they will be able to navigate it much more easily. We have the Bretons from High Rock. These are half-elves, actually. The Elder Scrolls version of half-elves, though they don't look it. Their specialty is magic and casting. The spells cost less for them to cast. They also are more resistant to spells. They have an increased gain to alliance points, which is the XP you gain in PvP. So if you want to gain that faster in PvP, they are an option. That said, and there's several of these that have these increases to XP gain of one type or another resource gain. Those are very marginal. So if you want to get into PvP, do not at all feel you need to roll a Breton. Just you get a little bit extra from this. But they're primarily focused on being used as healers or being used for Magicka DPS.
I also want to call out something there that you just said. When we go through these, like you just said, Stark, some of these numbers are so low, 1%.
Yeah, they are tiny.
We were talking about this before the show started. 1% should not, on its own, influence how you roll something. Meaning, if you really don't like the look of a Breton and that's going to make you not like your character, that 1%, play this game for passion. If you insist on being a min-maxer, there's your answer right there. Take that 1%, man. But if you're someone that's fresh and new and you're like, well, I really like the look of this people, I like their style, the 1% should not be your guiding factor.
This is also true to an extent with the actual stat bonuses that people tend to care about. I used the Bretons a second ago as an example. I'll use them again. Example, they get increased max magicka, which is nice. It increases your damage with magical abilities in this game, but the final increase is only 10%, and that sounds like a lot, but depending on how you're building your character, it might not be relevant. They also get a cost, like I said, they get a cost discount to their abilities, but that caps at 3%. Again, this is significant, but not so significant that it's like, oh hey, I want to do a magical caster, I have to pick this or one of the others that we're going to cover in a minute.
Very good point.
With the Khajiit, the Khajiit are the Catmen of Elsewhere. They're they're a fan favorite because of their hilarious speech patterns, and they're definitely here. They are apparently dirty thieves, though, because they actually keep their pickpocket. They keep a pickpocket bonus, and they get a medium armor bonus. Now, the way medium armor works in the game, this is for most players how you're going to get your stealth effective. So they're sneaky, and they pickpocket you. They also have bonuses that reduce their detection radius, so they have some innate sneaking ability on the race itself. They also increase their weapon crit, so this can be useful. They're useful for stand builds. They're useful for sneaky builds. But again, use them for what you want. If you want a Catman Sorcerer, absolutely go for it. The Nord is primarily responsible for getting punched in the face repeatedly and not noticing. They have a benefit for an extended duration on drinks, so one of the 2 food consumable items. They also gain two-hander faster. I'm mentioning these skill lines that advance faster. This is something that's useful for you when you're just starting the game because you'll actually advance through it a little bit faster and you'll get stuff. Once you've actually spent some time playing the game and gotten used to what you want to do, these become much less important because it's a very minor difference because of how skill progression works. So you can actually fully outstrip this and do whatever you want. But when you're starting out, you don't know what you're doing, and you're like, okay, well, here, they can use a two-hander. Cool. So you can hit people with a greatsword or a gigantic hammer, and they're happy to do that. The drinks bonus is a little bit more significant. We'll get back to this when we deal with the food bonus at the same time, but for the moment, that's there. Nords excel at being tanks, though the stats mean you could probably make a pretty decent stand build off of them. So after that, we've got the Orcs, the Orzamer from Orsinium. They're orcs. They're heavy armor. Yeah, if you don't know what an orc is from fantasy, this is probably a little bit rough to start into. Worth noting, in the Elder Scrolls, the orcs are actually elves. They're a variety of elves. So there is that, if you're wondering.
That's where they get their pointy ears.
Yeah. One of the things that's a little bit more significant for them is they actually learn to craft faster than the other races. I think I understand why, and it has to do with the orcs being very pronounced crafters in the lore, but that's an important option. It's not going to be game breaking. It's not going to be like, oh, I want to make a crafter, it has to be an orc. I've got an argument for something else that we'll get into later. But if you're starting out, you don't have anything else available, the orc is a pretty decent choice to start with as a crafter because you will catch up faster. And crafting can be very useful in this game. On top of that, they're really beefy. They get bonuses to health, health recovery, speed, max stamina. Yeah, there's the health recovery, so I was remembering that wrong. So they're really beefy, and if you want to make a tank, you're not going to go wrong with an orc. Also, if you want to hit people in the face with something large and heavy, you're not going to go wrong with.
I was gonna say, I actually almost see no orcs in our guild or anything like that. Like the people that I hang out with on the regular, I don't think I've seen any orcs, Stark. That's kind of, we talked about that a little bit too.
Yeah,
they're a little bit of a niche, right?
Yeah, they're niche. They're also really popular in specific circles. In the PvP community, they freaking love the orcs. So that's where they find a lot of their home. It's still a fairly small portion of the game's population overall, but they've got some very fanatical fans.
I can understand.
Wow, I just repeated myself. Okay.
So who we up to next after orcs? Wood elves?
Wood elves, or the Bosmer. Another elf race. Actually, one of the most popular races in the game. Their bonus is reduced fall damage. This is a little strange because on paper it says it's about 10% reduced fall damage, as I recall. And in practice, it tends to seem to be a lot stronger than that. It tends to be pretty significantly, either you make falls that should kill you and it just takes most of your health and you're like, wait, what? So I don't know exactly what the scaling on that is. I've never done enough experimentation with my wood elf to figure that one out.
You don't just jump off cliffs with your wood elf all the time?
I don't try to jump off cliffs in general because then I'm dead and it just brings the whole day down. So
I can see that.
But yeah. So wood elves, like the Khajiit, actually have stealth bonuses baked into their race. They're sneakier. Their innate skill is the bow, which should be familiar to anyone who's played an Elder Scrolls game in years, because the wood elves have a focus on bows, and they've got a culture built around archery in the trees and sneaking around, stabbing people in the face. So they're really great for stam races, and they're really good if you want to sneak around. They're not thieves the same way the Khajiit are, but they're still really sneaky. And this brings us to the Dark Elves. So the Dark Elves are a little bit interesting. Their basic skill that they advance with faster is dual wield, and their weird little side ability is they have increased resistance to lava damage, which is just when you're walking across lava in the environment. So again, it's kind of weird, kind of out there. The race itself is strange, though, because the bonuses focus on increasing both max magicka and max stamina. The second passive in the race, and you should probably say this, when you're creating a new character, you're not going to see any of this until you get to about level 5. Because until level 5, it's just, oh, hey, you picked the race you wanted, it looks like what you wanted. The stats won't actually appear until later. This was changed when Morrowind was released. Before that, your race was always visible. You could see it from character creation. So, partially in the range of don't worry about this too much. But here it is. So, they get a slightly better bonus to max magicka than stamina, but they do gain bonuses to both. And once you've started playing the game and gotten to a certain point in, you're going to realize you don't really want a character that does both magicka and stamina,
right? With
the exception of tanks. So it's a little strange. That said, the whole thing does work together very nicely. Oh, and they also have an innate bonus to flame damage. So there's actually a really strong synergy I'm going to explain in a second with this. They have a bonus to flame damage. They have innate flame resistance, and then they've got bonuses to both stats. So you can make a tank, because when you're a tank, the overall stat pool is more important than whether it's in one or the other. You can make a very strong tank with a Dragon Knight Dark Elf, because you're going to have your extra flame resist, you're going to have your extra fire damage from being a DK and from being a Dark Elf, and this will all stack together to make a very nice package. And if you want to go the extra step and make your character a vampire, you already have flame resistance baked into your race.
Very nice.
So there is this. You can legitimately sit here and put this together and say, okay, well, this is a really cool thing I want to play. If you don't want to, don't worry about it. You don't need to, but you can stack these guys together. And the Dark Elves do really synergize with the Dragon Knights well in general. So whether you want to do DPS or whether you want to tank.
Dark Elves just look cool, to be honest.
They do.
They're very, very neat. I don't think I would use their walking through lava sort of bonus, but...
I'm looking at that and I'm like, I can count on one hand the number of times I've intentionally wandered through lava enough that this would matter.
So gain immunity to the burning status effect. I see that too. Does that?
Okay, that's a lot more complex, but I can delve into this. Basically, each of the damage types in the game, there's 8 damage types. So when you take damage from a source, it'll be one of these. Each one of these, with the exception of, I think, physical and oblivion, have the chance to apply a status effect to you. I'd have to look it up to see which ones are what. But with fire, you can get the burning status effect, which is a small DOT over time afterwards. With cold, I think that's the one that slows you, like it's a weak root.
Right.
Disease applies minor defile, which reduces your healing received. Several of the races that have elemental resistance also pick up immunity to the effect that can proc off of that damage type. So Nords cannot be affected by chilled, the version you get from frost damage. DKs can't be, or not DKs, I'm sorry. Dark elves can't be burned. They can't get the burning effect. I think
that's great if you're a vampire.
Yeah, I think Argonians. Oh yeah, no, it is.
They gain immunity to poison and disease. It looks like
and disease. So they actually get both of those, and I think the wood elves get immunity to poison, but not disease. It might be the other way around.
So they do have some nice passive defenses.
Yeah, these
dots,
are there. Yeah,
really, or damage over time for anyone that's.
The funny thing about these bonuses is they were there all along. So I played this game for 4 years. I never knew that these races picked up immunities like that. It's like, unless you're really, really paying attention and really managing, you probably won't realize that's a thing that happens until much later. But yeah, these do actually have these resist. You can actually gain immunity to certain status effects. You can still suffer the status effect from other sources. So, for example, if you're playing a Dark Elf, well, actually, Dark Elf's a bad example because I don't know how else you. Oh, wait, no, I do. Okay, so you're playing a Dark Elf and you're hit by something else that applies a DOT, like poison damage, because it's also a weak DOT. That will still go through. You'll still pick up that same kind of DOT from that. You just can't get the one from the burning effect.
Right.
I forget how you'd apply minor defile to an Argonian, but there's certainly ways to do it. And oh yeah, I do. Poisons. Actual alchemical poisons that apply minor defile would apply it directly to the Argonian anyway. So it's immunity to accidentally picking it up from that damage type, but it's not immunity to the to that status effect itself. Just the specific status effect that can proc off of it. So like I said, this is a very complex subject.
We'll save that. We get into it more at a later point.
Yeah. So basically something not to worry about yet.
Yeah.
Let's see, where were we? We were going on to High Elves.
Yeah.
High Elves are one of the favorites in the community, especially for any kind of Magicka spellcasting build. They get increased max Magicka. They get increased Magicka recovery. So you have a larger Magicka pool, larger pool for your spells. And then on top of that, they also increase their Flame Frost and Shock damage significantly. So again, it's straight up, if you want to damage somebody with any kind of elemental damage and you're using Magicka to do that, which you are, this is going to be one of the first ones you want to think of. It also gains faster earning on the destruction skill line. So you're not only that, you're going to be getting better at casting spells faster. And then they also have increased experience gain, which it's a 1% increase, but that's still extra XP to level up faster. So they're a really cool race for any kind of spell casting you want to do. They're not the only answer. You don't need to take a high elf into the DPS route if you don't want to. I know people that have run high elves as tanks and have run them as stam, so that's certainly an option.
Wow.
But you can do this, and it's a really cool one if you just want to be the high elf sorcerer that's shooting lightning at everyone. Have fun.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Red Guards next, right?
Yep. These are a fan favorite for stamina builds. So again, this is stamina builds are your character is hitting people with swords, you're hitting people with bows, you're using physical weapons to pound the snot out of someone. And their primary gain is the one-handed shield skill line. So this is, you've got a shield, you've got a sword, you're going to start pounding on people with that. And then everything else builds into increasing stamina. So they increase recovery, they increase the maximum stamina, and then they gain an ability which lets them get stamina back every time they make a light attack. This can make them really, really good. I'm sorry, every time they make a melee attack. It's not a light attack. So every time you slap somebody around, in melee, you get more stamina to slap them around in melee some more. This makes them really popular for stamina-focused DPS. If you've got a character where you want a sneaky assassin type and you're really wanting to make them just keep going and never tire, the Red Guard can help you get there. They're very easy for long fights because of this, because they don't exhaust as fast. Now, you can still burn through your resources. You can still end up in a state where you don't have the resources to keep going, but they can come back from that faster. It occurs to me way back at the beginning when we were doing this, we did not cover how the Argonian gets resources back, and we can loop back to that in a minute. The one thing that's a little weird here is that Sword and Board is actually a skill line. It's something you're going to mostly be using for tanking.
Yes.
It has a lower damage
DPS with it. So yeah, good explanation, Stark.
Yeah, you see it in PvP sometimes, and it's a legitimate choice there. But the first ability in Sword and Board will actually apply a taunt. If you're familiar with MMOs, then this is a familiar term. If you're not familiar with MMOs, a taunt will force the enemy you're attacking to turn and attack you. In the normal Trinity structure, you use this as the tank to keep the enemy, whichever it is, usually the boss that you're fighting, off of the DPS. So you keep them focused on you and pounding on you. And while this is going on, the DPS can pound on it with impunity.
Yep.
So Sword and Board is really good for tanking, and quite frankly, the skill lines for the Red Guard actually look pretty good for a tank also, because they do use a lot of stamina. It's very important for them to be able to block and survive incoming attacks. But most of the time, this bonus gets ignored, and it's simply used as stam DPS, because those are also very attractive for a stamina DPS build, where you're trying to do damage, and you're hitting somebody in melee, and you're getting stamina back, and then you can just keep going. So that brings us through here. Oh yeah, and then their other bonus is the duration of food eaten by 15 minutes. So I'm going to cover this a little bit. This and the Nord bonus are actually fairly significant, but mostly when you're just starting out. In ESO, you eat food or you drink booze, tea, tonics, whatever, to get specific stat bonuses. And these stat bonuses can last for a couple hours. For experienced players, usually you'll have a pretty good supply of resources on hand, and you'll be able to make more, so it's not as significant where you can just go, oh, hey, I've got food, but I've got a stack of this stuff. Keep scarfing down when it runs out. When you're starting out, and especially when you're working with a new character, those bonuses mean that you can pick up you can get basic green food. That sounds horrifying when I say it.
Basic green food.
Basic green food.
Don't eat your food if it's green, you guys.
Should have eaten that before it got to this state.
That's fine.
That can actually extend it out to about 50 minutes, I think.
Wow. It's like a chunk.
Yeah, 50 minutes. So you take food that would have been good for about 35 minutes of bonus and extend it out to 50. And again, if you're just starting out with dungeons, or you're just starting out with harder content, and you wanted to start there, you didn't want to start with just doing normal questing, but dungeons are your jam, or PvP is your jam, these are actually pretty nice bonuses. Yeah. Because it means you're not going to be going through your resources as fast when you're starting out, when you have the least to work with. So you'll have more time with less pressure on your resources to build them up.
That's a very good point. Because in the very start, you're going to be a little bit conservative with what you have at hand. If you're gathering that first money pool, your person's not. We haven't even gotten into. We'll get into crafting at a later point. But if you can't make your own food at the time, that extra time addition is going to be very, very handy for you.
Yeah. That can also help a lot, where it's the difference between having to eat once in a dungeon and having to eat twice, especially when you're just learning it.
There's nothing worse than that falling off mid-boss fight, which still happens to me, by the way.
There are worse things. The worst thing is when it drops off mid-boss fight, you don't realize it 3 wipes later. Oh, my food's gone.
Oh,
that's worse. But yeah, so that's just one of these things that you get eventually. So
anything else with the Red Guard there?
I think that about covers them.
So our last one is one of my all-time favorites.
I love these guys. I really do.
The Imperials.
So the Imperials have the same one hand and shield line. And again, the race as designed has this same sort of, it's really good for tanks. It's also really good for stam DPS, but it's a little tankier. Their bonuses are they gain max health and max stamina. So they live longer and they hit harder with physical weapons. And then they have a bonus that their final bonus is that their melee attacks have a 10% chance to restore 2% of your max health, 4%, and then 6%. So this scales based on your max health.
Mm-hmm.
The more health you have, the more this heals you. The chance for it to happen is fairly low, but it's still, when you're attacking somebody in melee, where the Red Guard can start attacking somebody in melee and they can just get the energy to keep going, then Imperial can just keep attacking somebody in melee and heal off of it.
Yeah, that's very cool.
So, like the Red Guard, they get one hand and shield. And in this case, it's probably even a better piece of advice, because run these guys as tanks if you want. They're a lot of fun there. You can, I think we said earlier, you can just go, okay, well, this is cool. I'm going to use this stuff, but I'm going to actually make a magic character. Because with your stamina characters, magic is going to be useful for some utility. And health is always useful because you don't want to die.
Right. Try not to.
Yeah. Stamina is always going to be useful for magic characters because you need to run around. You need to dodge out of the way sometimes. Sometimes you just need to block because somebody's going to pound you into pulp.
Yep.
So
happens.
It's valuable for everyone. So when we're talking about going off spec with some of these things, like this is why. This is a very strong race if you want to make a Magicka build and you just want to plug out the other stuff. It's an exceptionally strong race if you want to make a character that just takes a beating. And that tends to be tanks or stam builds.
Yeah.
So the other thing they've got is they increase your gold gained by 1%.
One whole percent.
Yeah, so this is, you get to end game, you crack open a treasure chest, like a random treasure chest, you'll get 116 gold.
Yeah.
With an Imperial, you crack open the treasure chest, you get 117 gold.
Whoa! Stark, that's enough reason to roll this class, right? That one extra gold?
It's nice to have. It's nice to be able to say, okay, yeah, I've been doing stuff all day, and as a result, I've 15 more gold from it. Yeah, or 150 more gold. It's great. Is it enough to chase it? No. It's like the AP bonus from the Breton. It's nice. You can spend it on stuff. Does it matter? No, not really.
And that's kind of the key. We just unloaded a ton of information on you guys. I feel, I hope your brains are still turned on in the sense that there's so many different passives with these characters. And one of the keys that you'll want to see is probably actually pull up a website that has, and we can link some below, that have race guides. We'll put them in the show notes for this episode. But you'll want to look at these and kind of scroll through. I mean, you can see some of it in game, but nothing like having it all in front of you when you make a decision. Like we said when we started, there are some better benefits. Like we talked about high elves having a really, they're really advantageous if you're going to do a sorcerer, because you're going to, or someone that's using Magicka and using fire, lightning, or frost damage. But that doesn't mean you can't roll somebody else. I mean, if you want a Red Guard sorcerer, by all means, there's nothing stopping you from doing it. And that's a question I feel like we get a lot on Twitch, is people saying, hey, what can I do this class race combo?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, this is actually personal. This is a personal bugbear too, because it's like you'll see people are like, no, you can't use this race, or it's like, you want to do stamina DPS, you need to have a Red Guard. It's like, no, you really don't.
Mm-hmm.
And you really do not.
In fact, that's kind of worse for everybody, saying you have to do it. Because you get this perception that you need to play the game in a certain way. You get people saying, well, the whole play as you want thing isn't true, and it's really open. You have a lot of options and you're not actually pigeonholed. But you see a lot of players, especially ones that come off of a build list from someone else, and they go, okay, well, it needs to be this way. And it's no, there's a lot of flexibility here. Speaking of flexibility, I don't think we had this in our show notes here, but let's talk for a second about what faction you're going to go with, because that's another important thing in the character creation. So when you start going through here, you'll see Daggerfall Covenant, Aldemary Dominion, and the Ebonheart Pact. Now, if you're very first just getting into the game, you are going to be locked to a couple races that can roll in each faction. So what does a faction actually do? Factions are primarily useful nowadays, 2018 style. Factions are used in Cyrodiil PvP. Is there anything else you can think of, Stark, that really, other than just dictating your starting zone, anything else?
It doesn't even dictate your starting zone now, unless you're buying, if you buy Tamriel Unlimited, so you buy like the $10 version off of Steam or off of the store, then you actually get the original starting locations that way. Mm-hmm. But if you buy Morrowind, or you buy a copy with Morrowind bundled in, or you buy Somerset, you're not going to see that. You'll actually be dropped into the new zones. So you'll either be dropped in Saint Anine, or you'll be dropped in it's on the east coast of it's the east coast of Somerset. And I'm like, what's the name of the city?
Shimmerine.
Yeah, Shimmerine.
I was there last night on my brand new Warden. They said it enough.
Yeah. But yeah, so between those two, like, you won't see the original starting zones, like, from picking your race. But when you go back to the mainland, this is actually pretty good advice if you're just starting out and you're not familiar with what's going on around you. You can find ways to get back to the mainland. Worst case, when you look at your world map, you should see these way shrines, these little shrine icons on your world map that are actually part of the main continent. I would strongly recommend porting to one of those, and you should be approached by a character called the Hooded Figure. It'll give you a quest. This will put you in your original starting zone. Like, it'll run you through the original tutorial, and it'll put you in your original starting zone. The content there will be easier. If you want it, if it drops you in Somerset or it drops you on Vardenfell, for Morrowind, and you want to run that, feel free, please do. But it's entirely up to you. But the tutorials, the original zones, are a lot easier to get started in, a lot easier to orient yourself in.
Right.
But yeah, the only things your alliance affects is which one of those you'll be put in first, and what you do, which side you're on in the Cyrodiil War. Originally, they had completely separate PvE zones for each. And so you would pick a faction, and that would determine what your PvE content would be in the order you do it in. That is no longer true. That was changed about a year and a half ago.
Thank goodness.
It's a really strong improvement. Yeah, it's a really strong improvement. The game is much better for it.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. I mean, it would limit so much of your ability to play around in the world. And that's something to keep in mind, too. If you're first getting into this and you have a friend that plays, you do not have to be so choosy when you get into Elder Scrolls Online. We gave you a ton of information that, like I said, you might want to look at visually online to see what races have what passives, because it's a lot of information to take in. But it's important to keep in mind that in Elder Scrolls Online, it's very hard to screw up. There's almost nothing you can do to screw up when you're starting a character. You can always roll a new one. You have, is it 8 character slots to start with, Stark? Yeah,
you start with 8. The absolute maximum you can put on an account right now is 15.
So there's nothing wrong with you saying, hey, I want to roll an Argonian Nightblade, and then realizing you want to change that up to a different one. In fact, that's pretty much how I started, was I rolled a something sorcerer. I rolled like maybe a Breton sorcerer, and I played him, got him up a level or two. I was like, okay, this is fine, but someone's got to be better. Then I rolled a Templar, and then I rolled a Nightblade, and I was like, ooh, I dig in the Nightblade, I'm sticking with him. So it took me 3 attempts to find my niche to start out with, someone that I really jived with from the first level to max level. So there's nothing wrong with restarting. The other thing is, if you know friends that are in the game, you can immediately start playing with them. As soon as you're out of the tutorial zone, you can hop right in with them. And in fact, that's what we did last night. Some of the guildies, one of the guildies met me on my new Warden. As soon as I got out, they were dancing in front of me, Stark. They were dancing at me. Yeah. And we went and we started doing the Somerset quest line, just because why not? So there's very little you can do to screw up. But before we get on to some more depth on that, reiterating, when it comes to Alliance, the only thing you're going to be separated in really truly is Cyrodiil. For those that don't know, Cyrodiil is an open world PvP zone, so it's not like hopping into an individual battleground. If you know how battlegrounds work in other MMOs, it's a similar concept. You queue for it, you pop in. Cyrodiil, there's PvE mixed with PvP there, so it's a very fun zone. However, if your friend is on a different alliance, that is where you will have your only disconnect from them. And I'd argue that's maybe not even 10% of the total game is Cyrodiil. So
yeah, it was originally the placeholder for end game content once you've done all the dungeons, but now it's, if you enjoy it, like, it's a very unique kind of PvP. I've seen a few other games that have elements of it, but I don't think I can't name another MMO that has a similar PvP system, because it really is this full campaign system where you're capturing keeps and you're holding territory and try to take control of the entire zone. So
definitely
it's
worth
unique.
doing at some point.
Yeah.
Very, very fun.
Yeah.
So, Stark, what if I want to roll someone that's in a different alliance? But I've seen a Khajiit who's supposed to be in the Aldemir Dominion. I've seen them in Daggerfall Covenant. How can I do that?
Khajiit get everywhere.
Khajiit are everywhere.
Pretty much. So originally it was a pre-order bonus. Hold on a second.
You're fine.
Sorry about that. Originally, it was a pre-order bonus. There's an any race, any alliance feature, which you can still pick up, and this will let you roll a character in a different alliance and play them in that alliance, regardless of their race. Generally speaking, this used to be a lot more valuable than it is now, because again, it used to be that it was completely different PvE content depending on your race. Now it affects what you roll in Cyrodiil. And for that purpose, if you're spending a lot of time in Cyrodiil, it's probably worth it if you want to get a specific race into Cyrodiil.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's not something you really need unless you want it for RP purposes, playing purposes. And that's actually an interesting thing. Like, there's a lot of stuff in the that's really just there for role-playing purposes. If you want to role-play your character this way, or you want to have this aspect of your character, it's there. But otherwise, it's not really necessary.
And we should also call out that the Imperial is locked behind the purchase of... Do you remember the name of it, Stark? I don't, actually.
It's the Imperial Edition. It was the original
edition.
Collector's Edition at launch, and that was the formal name for it, was the Imperial Edition.
And I believe it's about still $20 worth of crowns nowadays?
I think so. I think it's 21. Yeah, I think it's 21, and I think the any racing right. 19. Because I remember when you combine them, it's 40.
Yeah. So you can pick up the Imperial if you'd like. It's a very nice... I mean, when you buy it, you get an in-game pet with it. You get the ability to play as an Imperial, and then you also get a mechanism. We won't go into detail, but you get a mechanism to marry another player within the game. That's a whole other thing for a different day. But, that unlocks it, so you get some extra little things with it. Imperials are very cool, like we said, and they let your Imperial can actually choose what alliance they want to work for.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, you can do Daggerfall, Ebonheart, whatever you want. Yeah. So hopefully that makes some... No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, because in the lore of the setting, the Imperials, each of the other races, their homeland has become part of an alliance. Mm-hmm. So that's why there's the 3 alliances. You got 9 races split between them evenly. And the Imperials in Cyrodiil aren't really a part of that at all. Now, the way Tamriel, the world of Scrolls, is actually, the continent of Elder Scrolls, is actually set up, there's a lot of population shift. There's a lot of people that live in provinces that aren't actually their ancestral homeland. So when we have any race in the alliance, it's, oh, hey, you've got a Breton, but they're from Skyrim. You've got a Dark Elf, but they're from High Rock. That's fine. That's normal. That's the way the setting behaves. Mm-hmm. With the Imperials, traditionally they're from Cyrodiil, and they don't generally leave Cyrodiil in large numbers. But Cyrodiil isn't a part of any of the alliances because it's currently under invasion. So, and all of the alliances are fighting over it. So in this case, they're not actually attached to any of the alliances, presumptively.
Yeah. And it makes for... the lore is a whole other... That we could spend many days talking about the lore. It just... If you're interested in it, we encourage you definitely go check it out. There's some great hubs that I'm sure we'll call out as this podcast continues to grow. If you believe it, Stark, we've already talked for 45 minutes to these people about the wonders of choosing classes and races. But and now you know a little bit more about which alliance you can actually get into. We wanted to tackle 2 more things before we get out of here. One, Stark got an awesome opportunity to go to Bethesda Gameplay Days, and that was in Seattle. Is that right?
Yeah.
And that was in kind of in conjunction, not on the campus of, but near PAX West. So that's...
Yeah, it was near PAX. It was the Hard Rock Cafe on Pike Street.
Very cool. So I think let's tackle this one thing before we dive in there. We had this in our show notes. We can always dive into this in the next episode too. Can you screw up, Stark? In very brief terms.
The only thing you can do is screw up your first playthrough experience, like your actual experience with playing the game and experiencing it for the first time and learning it. Everything else can be reversed or changed later.
And I think what we want to emphasize on that one about screwing your own experience, the only thing I think we really want to leave you with for this one is to take your time and enjoy the world. It is massive. It is beautiful. It has voice-acted quests. I mean, it's a fantastic experience. Really take the time to smell the roses in this case.
Yeah.
Some people...
Also worth remembering...
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Also worth remembering, you are not gated off from anything in this game.
Good point.
When you get to level, the only thing you can't do from the moment you leave the tutorial is PvP. You need to get to level 10 for PvP. For everything else, you can go wherever and do whatever. This includes group content and end game content. If you've got people that are willing to run it with you, you can actually go into that content with them. So you do not even need to be, some preset level to actually go and start experiencing end game content. There's a harder difficulty for that stuff that unlocks much later in the game. But just being able to participate and see the stuff that's there, all you need are friends.
And we're going to call out, I mentioned a couple times, we have a guild on PC North America that I'm in and host it and run it and guild leader it. We'll put that in some of the show notes below if you want to kind of join up with that. But it is great to find friends. We're going to actually tackle that in a whole separate episode coming up about the social component in the game, because I'm a thorough believer that any MMO, it is massive multiplayer online for a reason. Elder Scrolls has a great single player component to it. You can manage a lot of this game by yourself, but there's nothing like doing things with friends. And some of the stuff is a lot easier to do if you have a friend, especially one that knows something about the game. Or, I mean, honestly, this game would be a blast to play with two people that don't know what's going on. I mean, really, it's so welcoming.
That was my introduction to it, yeah.
See, there you go. So Stark, let's leave them with that. Stop and smell the roses. We'll talk for a brief minute here about Bethesda gameplay days. We can talk more than a minute, actually. Let's hear it. What did you do? So what day did this take place? Okay. Friday?
So this was actually Friday. Came in kind of late on Friday because of work schedule, but with Saturday I was in there and had an opportunity to actually mess around with Meier a little bit. It's always a little tricky when you're dealing with new content you're not familiar with and you have a very limited time frame. And you know the game.
Well, we should tell them
for a lot of people,
Meier is, huh?
Yeah, Meier is the next DLC that's released for the game. This is going to be a new zone you can explore. We don't have an exact release date on this. It's going to be reaching the public test environment on the 17th of the month, I believe. I didn't get that number firsthand, so it could be off, but that's going to be on the PTS, so the public test server, later this month. And it's a new zone. It's new content. The game is constantly adding new stuff to do. There's a lot of cool stuff here. If you're already familiar with the game, it's adding another arena. I think it's the Black Rose Prison, though I might be getting the name slightly wrong. For
those that have done Dark Brotherhood content, Gold Coast, is that the same sort of style like the Kvatch Arena?
No, this is more like Dragonstar or Maelstrom, which I don't believe you've encountered yet.
No, I haven't.
So what this is it's a set space in which you deal with multiple waves of enemies followed by a boss with multiple rounds. This time it's actually shorter than the existing ones. So I think it's only 5 rounds total as opposed to the 9 that you get from DSA and from Maelstrom. And also I think this actually exists. Yeah, this would exist as both normal and as vet. So it's in the range of you're level 3, you got 3 friends with you, you can go in and you can do this. It takes elements from Maelstrom, so it has the power-up system that Maelstrom used that lets you temporarily empower various members of your party. And it has the group structure from DSA, so you can go in and you've got your friends, you're not having to do this alone. It's going to be very challenging content for endgame players. This is stuff that you really want to test yourself against challenging content. That's going to be there. That's a big draw for this expansion. Other than that, there's going to be a full new PvE storyline. I didn't get the chance to really explore that at all because it's an awkward environment to test, to actually explore in.
Right.
But
you're sitting at the Hard Rock questing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Not the most immersed, I'm guessing.
No, but a lot of fun. And a lot of fun to see this. Seeing new enemies, seeing new enemy types, new content. Yeah, a bunch of new stuff. So that's coming in the future. Beyond that, then Bethesda also had Rage 2. They had Elder Scrolls Legends, and I think they had Prey Moon Crash available to play on the floor. I think Moon Crash was the only one that was actually already released, because that came out, I think with E3.
Oh, got it. Okay. That's cool.
And, also Quake Champions, which I saw for most of the day and just did not register at all. But yeah, so...
Well, I think there's something to touch on there briefly too, without holding people too long in this episode, is that the Elder Scrolls Online has a great release cycle. It's one of the things that I'm the most blown away by. You know, if you're someone that knows World of Warcraft or some of the other MMOs out there, you often get stuck waiting 2 years for a new expansion to come along. You might get a little trickle of content along the way. And I've only been playing for about 2 to 3 months now, so I can't say I've experienced this firsthand. You have. But it seems like a really good spread.
You've been here for about 2 months, and you've gotten... This is going to be your third content drop.
Yeah.
Because you came in on new content, and then...
Somerset released, right?
Right about Somerset when released.
Wow.
Yeah.
Somerset,
yeah, so this is going to be your third content drop.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I mean, that you really... Sometimes in MMOs, you can have that personal struggle to keep it interesting. MMOs benefit the people that can get in there and play almost daily. There's always incentivization for that in MMOs. And this makes it easy to be excited to do that, because you're not going more than, we just said 2 to 3 months in the game, and I've experienced so far 2, and I'm looking at my third content drop. I got in right as Somerset was launching, the whole chapter. That's what their annual expansion to the game. It adds quite a bit of content. And then I had the Wolf Hunter DLC sort of drop that some new dungeons into the game. And then now we're looking at Meier. So that's crazy. And this is their new thing. Is that right, Stark? They've pretty much decided to
they've been doing this for... actually, they've been maintaining the content release cycle since Arsinium or Imperial City. So basically, once they started doing this, they've pretty much kept to it. There have been a couple of content drops that did not get new DLC associated with them. Okay. So when housing was first added, there wasn't any paid DLC added with that. It was just straight up, oh, hey, here's a base game addition to the entire game. And with one Tamriel, where they redid the leveling system so that everything is scaled now and you can just go wherever, that also did not come with an expansion. But starting with... they've actually kept it up, starting with the Imperial City. So this was back in 2015, I think. They've managed to get a DLC release every 3 months. They've managed to get one large zone each year. Hrothgar is not a chapter, but from the way it's structured and what they ended up doing, it looks a lot like the chapters that came later. So that's there, and then one large zone, and then a mix of smaller zones and dungeon DLC.
Wow.
So yeah, there's always stuff coming out.
Yeah, and that's great news. If you're an MMO player in the past, that's something to be super excited about. There's nothing worse than downtime between content, and ESO gives you so little of that. You got a good network of friends. Honestly, if you're just getting into the game now, you're probably set for a very long time worth of content. Yeah. I have barely scratched the surface in 2 months of playing quite a bit. And I'm a guy that does about 4 hours a day on Twitch, 5 nights a week, and some nights way longer than that. And I barely touched the game. So
much stuff.
Crazy.
Yep.
I think we are at a good natural wrapping point for this one, Stark. We covered a lot of content, talked about what classes exist in the game, talked about the races you can play, reminding that everyone that you can just go out there and play what you want. There's nothing wrong with trial and error in this game. In fact, that is hugely encouraged. Rolling that new character last night on stream, people were like, no, just go out there and fail. Because really, you learn from your mistakes. You see what works and what doesn't.
You also learn stuff that you wouldn't expect. You can get a tendency in this kind of thing to look at people and say, well, the theory crafter said this about an MMO. Really with ESO, and I know this, I know some of the theory crafters are great people, but we didn't cover everything. We didn't look at everything. And there is always a lot of stuff. It's like you take these pieces and you put them together and it's like, this shouldn't work. And yet it's a lot of fun and it actually does what it's supposed to do, what you need it to do. So yeah, just play with it. Like, find the stuff that appeals to you, mess around with it, see if it works for you. If it doesn't work for you, or if it's not as good as you're hoping, then feel free to change it up. But yeah, just try it, play with it, find stuff that looks fun.
Love
and
it.
if it fails, don't worry about it. The penalties for failure in this game are very mild.
Yeah, almost nothing at all.
Yeah.
So good. Enjoy, everybody. Enjoy that. Next week, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the mechanics behind your character. So now that you've got someone set up, and that's your homework between the time you've listened to this episode, is you go set up your character, fool around, maybe make 3 characters like I did, see which one really kind of tweaks you the most. Next week, we'll come back with some inventory management tips because you're going to be picking up a lot of loot. We're going to be talking about blocking mechanics, how kind of how to save your own skin out there in the field. We're going to give you some tips on questing. We're going to go deeper into the dungeon finder and battlegrounds. We'll give you the basics for that. So this podcast is probably going to hit everyone's feed. The tentative release cycle, this being the very first episode, we're recording them on Sundays. And so I expect them to get into your ears between Sunday night and Monday morning, I would guess. So look forward to that. Stark, do you have links that you want people to know where to find you? Anything you want to shout out?
Mostly I'm just on the forums, so we can put that in the show notes.
Excellent. And he's at StarkeRealm. Yeah. And then for myself, we are on Twitch a lot. So Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. You can find us over on Twitch. It's Kyle Dempster Studios is the tag. You'll often see Stark hanging out there in voice chat or in text chat. You'll meet a lot of our cool guildies. Very, very helpful people. Again, I play on PC North America as well as Stark, so we're always around to hang out with people. Also, very approachable. I want to call that out. This community is really good. There's a very low barrier to entry to play with people, so we really take advantage of that too. People are always open to questions. Like, you could really... I saw this pop up the other day. Someone said, if you see someone you like, or someone in a dungeon doing something you like, feel free to whisper them when they're not busy and just say, hey, can I have some tips on that thing that you're doing? Because very often people will say, oh yeah, I do this, and give you some details. So that being said, feel free to hit us up. We'll have links in the show notes below. Like I said, my Twitch channel is Kyle Dempster Studios. I'm over on Twitter at Kyle Dempster Stu, STU. Can't fit the full thing. And I'm trying to think if we need to call out anything else. Website. Go check this out. If you want if you want to share more links to the show, it is thenetspodcast.com, and that is TENETS, different than tenants, as in your people living in your building. Two different things. So that's gonna do it for us this week. Stark, thank you so much for being on the show. I really look forward to our next episode. Until next week, bye-bye.